Today on the Locked On Steelers podcast, we'll talk about the impact of Diontae Johnson being out, and also, are the Steelers misusing safety Minkah Fitzpatrick with the way that he was lined up in the Niners game? We'll talk about that, Pickett, whether he was concussed or not in the Niners game, and some defensive line talk before they face the Browns. All here on a Wednesday episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter with Tony Serino. He's back. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50 or more infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. As I said before, we've got Tony Serino back. You know, I love Tony Serino, one of the OG hosts of the Locked On Steelers podcast. He brought me onto this show way back when. He's back to do some show. And Tony, this is your quote unquote retirement show?
I mean, technically speaking, Chris, I'm actually coming out of retirement today. Very controversial appearance on Locked On Steelers by me, because I am technically. Well, I do want to ask this of the people in the comments today. Can you retire from a hobby? What is it called when you stop doing a hobby? Because I've called this a retirement, but I think it sounds stupid to me to say that you're retiring from something that is just a hobby. So let me know how I'm supposed to phrase this. But anyway, yes, I'm not a podcaster anymore. I've retired from that, but I retired. But I knew this, Chris, okay? I could not retire without appearing on Locked On Steelers one final time. So,
my guy,
let's do it. Let's talk about a big, let's talk about the Steelers, because it was, you just wish this show could be done under better circumstances, right? I mean,
No, absolutely. But let's lead off this about Diontae Johnson. We knew Cam Hayward was out for 8 weeks. He's on injured. He's going to be put on injured reserve soon. But Diontae Johnson now said to be out for a few weeks, which to me tells me anywhere from 2 to 3, maybe 2 to 4 if you stretch it. He had a hamstring that we all saw. This, I think, has a big impact on what the Steelers want to do, despite him not having a touchdown still since 2021. You could see he was getting open a lot in that game Sunday. And if Kenny Pickett could have just played a normal game as a quarterback, Diontae Johnson would have had a really big game, because he could not be covered by the Niners.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's the thing about Diontae. I know the fan base is, I don't know, would you say the Steelers fan base is split on Diontae?
I'd say so.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of people who are just kind of tired of Diontae, obviously because of all of the, the running backward stuff, the drops earlier in his career, yada yada. I mean, it's one thing after another. Obviously, last year people bring up the no touchdown thing. He should have scored a touchdown on Sunday, Chris. I mean, that play. I mean, the play at the end of the first half. That's a walk-in if Kenny puts
a walk-in touchdown.
Yeah. So no, this is a huge deal for the Steelers, because as much as the fans will harp on the negative of Diontae, the positive here is, like you said, this guy is always open. Right? I mean, he's the 7-11 wide receiver for the Steelers. This dude is always open. He is one of the best route runners in the National Football League, and he is a safety blanket for Kenny whenever he needs him. Now, obviously this week it was tough for Kenny, and we'll talk about that later in the show. But the concern here is going up against a Browns team that, as we saw this Sunday against the Cincinnati, that's going to be very, very aggressive. You need a safety blanket, right? You need someone who you can trust to be in their spot, because Kenny's likely going to have to get rid of get the ball out of their hot. I think that would have been Diontae. The question is going to be now, who's that going to be, and who are you go like 3rd and 4? Who are you going to? Because I've seen a lot of people say, well, they're just going to have to go to Pickens. They're going to need to feed the ball to Pickens, 10, 15 times. I would love that. But we talked about it all off season, right, Chris? The guy has to be a more crisp, better route runner. And he's talked about expanding the route tree and all of that. Let's see it. I mean, this is, you kind of throw him in the deep end a little bit, right? Like, let's see it right now, because that's what they need George Pickens to be, a more reliable target, not just a 50-50 guy.
No, I agree. It is something that they need to happen there. I think what might happen is Allen Robinson be that go-to guy on third downs
Yeah.
in situations. But I also think Calvin Austin had a pretty decent day as far as getting open, and I think that he's going to be a big factor here. But we'll see how that continues. The other topic I wanted to lead off today with is about Minkah Fitzpatrick, because he didn't have a really particular good game. The only time that he was really noticeable was when he missed a sack on Brock Purdy. But when I looked back and I was seeing him line up all over the place, he lined up, and according to Pro Football Focus, he lined up 6 times by the D line, 13 times in the box, 13 times as a slot corner, 8 times as an outside corner, and then 28 times as a free safety. Tony, I get that Minkah Fitzpatrick is extremely talented, but is this a mistake to be taking him that much out of his free safety role, or is this something that can eventually work and just didn't because the Niners were a really good offense?
I mean, I think you know, Tomlin talks about this a lot about wanting position flexibility and what that does for you from a disguise perspective and all of that, and you know, just kind of helping out. But boy, I mean, it certainly didn't help on Sunday, did it? And maybe this was scheme specific to what Shanahan was bringing to the table, and this is not something they're going to do every week. But if this is going to be something the Steelers are going to do every week now, where they're going to be moving Minkah around and not just using him as you know, what he is, which is the best middle safety, the best deep safety in the National Football League, you know, this may end up being a misuse. Yeah, I mean, we may go back to a Minkah Fitzpatrick like he was in Miami, who was kind of a disappointment, wasn't he? I mean, they used him a lot in the slot. They used him a lot. They moved him around a lot. And the thought was about Minkah is like, boy, this guy is not really living up to the hype. When the Steelers got him, they kind of put him as that deep middle safety and kind of kept him there. And that's what made him the player he is today. When they got Demonte Casey and they kind of used him to replace Edmonds, it did make sense to me that they probably wanted to move Minkah around a little more. But like you said, I mean, he played less than 50% of the snaps at free safety. Yeah. That is a big shift from where the Steelers have been in the past. So, you know, it's hard to say like they're misusing him after one game, because, you know, one game, you don't want to draw big conclusions like that in a 1 game sample size. But based on what we saw on Sunday, you know, we're not trending in the right direction. It's not arrow pointing up, as Mike Tomlin would say.
I agree. It didn't work out. Now, maybe there's something coming. I will say this too. I wonder how much of this gets impacted when Desmond King is activated, because he was not active on the game day roster, maybe because he was brought in midweek and needs to adjust to things and get up to speed with there. I do wonder if that plays a big factor for the Steelers, because if he's in the slot, and you know, I think he's a starter capable slot guy, more so than Shandon Sullivan or Elijah Riley right now. They're good depth pieces who can come in pinches. But if he goes in there, then maybe you're like, okay, well, slot's covered. Then you can move him, and Desmond King can do a little bit outside. You don't want him living out there because of his size. But then you can flip-flop him and Patrick Peterson a little bit more. Levi Wallace you keep on the outside, or whenever you want to start playing Joey Porter Jr. more. But Minkah Fitzpatrick then can kind of be in more traditional roles, keep him in the robber, keep him in the deep center fielding free safety, or you still keep moving around. But I do wonder if the Steelers are not keeping it simple, stupid here in this situation.
Yeah, it's certainly something to keep an eye on as the season progresses, right? Was this a 1 game thing that they wanted to do because it's Shanahan's offense and there's something that Tomlin and Terrell Austin saw on tape that they felt like Minkah could cover up for them? Or is this, is this something that they just want to do with Minkah now, and they feel like they have the personnel to cover, like you said, that the deep safety role or that robber role, and they want Minkah in a different spot? I'd say something to watch going forward, because it didn't work this week. It's not to say it won't work forever, right? I mean, like, this is a new defense with a lot of new pieces on it. I think it's something that hasn't been talked about enough. It's like,
very true.
There is a lot of new moving parts here. So, you know, communication, obviously, you and I have talked about defensive communication a lot in our history. That, you know, communication takes time. I know they got a bunch of veterans on this defense, and that should help things, but clearly, you know, this is a work in progress defense. And I think their use of Minkah Fitzpatrick seems to be a work in progress as well.
Absolutely. I want to talk about other things here. There's been the question, and I don't think it's an unreasonable question from the fans now that we've seen a replay, but from the first sack that Kenny Pickett took, he did bounce his head off of the turf, and there was a question, could he have been concussed by that? Mike Tomlin actually addressed that during his Tuesday press conference. I was there for that. We'll play that clip and talk about more things here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Don't go anywhere. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Tony Serino back on the show. But first, before we do anything else, we want to remind you this show is also sponsored by eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're preparing for a draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So with draft prep underway for the upcoming season, let's see who Vinny has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the week. If you're looking for a sweet matchup to exploit for a big game at wide receiver in week 2, turn to the Chargers' Mike Williams. Williams was quiet and banged up in the run-heavy opener against Miami in week 1, but he draws a beautiful spot against a Titans secondary which struggled to handle any of the Saints receivers downfield, including Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. Look for Justin Herbert to hit on at least one big scoring play to Williams, and that's something that you can take to the bank, just like you could take to the bank when you get eBay's Guaranteed Fit. And you get over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips. You can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Air filters, brakes, batteries, tail lights, alternators, shocks, struts, you name it, eBay Motors has it. And they'll make sure it's the right fit for your car, because eBay's Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what parts you need for your vehicle the first time. So go forth, switch gears, crank the AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up, because now you know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go. With eBay's Guaranteed Fit, everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay's Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Tony Serino back on the show. Follow him at Steeler Country on Twitter. Tony, let's get to this. I wouldn't call it a conspiracy theory, but a theory that has been proposed by fans and other people who just saw it and are like, whoa, because you look back at Kenny Pickett when he took that first sack. I think it was Drake Jackson. Yeah, he was swinging him to the ground, and it was a perfectly legal sack. It's what you wanted. He didn't put his weight on him, but when he swung him to the ground, Kenny Pickett's head just bounced off the field, and he got up fine. He looked okay, and he played the full game, and there weren't any questions about it. But then it wasn't until that replay started going across the Twitterverse and the internet that everyone was starting to say, well, wait a second, is he concussed again? Was that maybe that's why he was playing so poorly? I don't think that was the case at all. But Mike Tomlin was asked about that. I want to give a chance for everyone to hear how Mike Tomlin addressed the question of that play and also talked about how Kenny Pickett handled everything.
Mike, was Pickett banged up at all on that first sack, and did he get evaluated for concussion?
Level of banged up, I'm not certain of. There's so many protocols in place now, independent medical specialists and so forth. I would imagine the quarterback position has less of my eyes directly than it used to because of it. So I didn't have direct eyes on what it is that you mentioned. Obviously, I saw it after, but there was no hesitancy from the independent medical experts and so forth. He didn't express any symptoms relative to that play that you mentioned, so it was a non-discussion for us.
Was there anything you put your finger on regarding his relative inaccuracy to what we saw in August?
We're not looking for comfort or excuses. The tape is who we are at this juncture, and so we're going to work to change the tape that we have control over. That tape's in the bin. That's his, it's mine, it's ours. Monday night is a little bit different, and that's why we're working.
Another thing that Mike Tomlin said, when asked if what he could expect about Kenny Pickett improving, he said, "quote unquote," his commitment is what makes him believe that. He said, "There's football justice, and when you work at it, good things come out of it." This is a guy who's fully committed. Largely, those type of guys make their own fortune. There's reason to expect guys who work the way that he works to bounce back. But let's address this a few different things that he said here, Tony. One. Someone's going to say he's not paying attention to the quarterback. No, that's not what he's saying. What he's saying is there are independent medical officials that are not part of the Steelers, that are part of the NFL, who their only job is to watch and see if there are concussion issues. They did not have an issue with Kenny Pickett, and Kenny Pickett did not report any issues. So according to the Steelers and the NFL, because they are a factor in this, there was nothing to be concerned with. Now, my guess at what the Steelers probably won't say or reveal is they might have, once they'd seen that, because Mike Tomlin did acknowledge, hey, saw that afterwards, they probably did say like, okay, let's do a test here. Kenny Pickett passed the test, and voila, he was fine.
Yeah.
I don't think this was a case of the Steelers hiding anything or anything being missed. And I don't think this was a case of Kenny Pickett playing poorly because of that play, because, in fact, it was poor play in that play that got him sacked when he had two wide open wide receivers at different parts of the field. But, Tony, what was your reaction just seeing that and then hearing Mike Tomlin?
Well, I think, look, it's plausible to look at the play, right? I mean, his head clearly hits the ground in a violent way. I mean, it's like a whiplash effect, right? When he goes down. So I don't think it's certainly not wrong of people to wonder, like, hey, did he get his bell wrong on this play type of thing, right? And did that lead to a concussion? I don't, certainly if you look back at like the concussion he took against the Ravens last year, I mean, it was a similar looking play. So I get that aspect of it. Now, to say that the Steelers were like hiding it or anything like that, to your point, you can't hide concussions, and people will go back to the Dolphins thing last year with Tua. There are independent neurologists on the sideline that are supposed to, like, their job is to diagnose these things as they happen, to see a hit, to start the test, to run the test. If there's any symptoms whatsoever, they get held out of the game, right? So that's what Tomlin was saying there, is like, look, I don't have any control over this stuff, right? It's all up to the doctors. Now to address Kenny Pickett's play. And I mean, the idea that this is he had to play this bad because it's a concussion. I mean, this is, to use a modern term, copium on the part of Steeler fans, because look, I think there was a ton of excitement going into this game, and there was an expectation specifically of Kenny Pickett going into this game. When you looked at the preseason he had, and you heard what Kenny talked about, what all his teammates talked about, what all his coaches talked about, it seemed like Kenny Pickett had taken a step as far as being more of a leader, being more poised, being more calm, cool, collected type of quarterback, right? And that he's going to have more control over this offense now. And you wanted to see that from Kenny on Sunday, specifically given the preseason that he had and how calm, cool, collected he looked in those games, how accurate he looked in those football games, and everything we'd heard coming out of training camp and on everything the teammates and coaches were saying. None of that played out, right? I mean, none of that played out on Sunday. Right. And I think that's where fans are trying to grasp to, like, wait, what happened here? How did Kenny go from everything we saw in preseason to this play? The difference, though, Chris, I think, is like, this is not play it's not like we've never seen Kenny play like this.
Right.
The disappointing part is that Kenny Pickett reverted back to the worst of Kenny Pickett we've ever seen, which I would argue is that Philly game. That's who Kenny was again. And obviously that's a huge disappointment, but I don't think we're going to blame. I don't think you can just say, well, it's the concussion that did it to him, or it's this hit that did it to him. I mean, Kenny Pickett is fully capable of not playing well. We've seen this in the past. He did it on Sunday. The question now, like Tomlin said there, is, and I love, by the way, he used like the British phrase. I wonder if he was doing it like in a British way when he said that tape's in the bin. Like garbage. Yeah. But anyway, I mean, that tape, yes. Well, that tape should go in the bin. Yes. But no, I mean, the thing now is, how does Kenny bounce back from this? It was so unlike Kenny what we saw in this game, because remember when we left off a year ago, when we left off Kenny Pickett, he was poised in big moments of the game. Now he kind of escaped the pocket too often. He had a lot of problems in structure, but still he was able to make big plays in big moments. That's the opposite of the Kenny Pickett we saw on Sunday. He can bounce back. We've seen him play better than this. It's a question of if at this point. Can Kenny Pickett bounce back from what was, probably the worst game he's played as a pro, considering where he is?
I agree with that assessment. I mean, one thing I saw, some people were like, maybe he just can't handle the big stage. And I'm like, buddy, he had 4 game-winning drives last year in his rookie season. That's impressive. He can handle the big stage. I don't think that's it. I think that what probably would have happened, and something that I, since watching the All-22 a lot more, I think the Niners did a lot of really smart things as far as disguising their coverages, lining up with 2 high, switching to 1, lining up with 1, switching to 2, and when they did it, because they weren't doing it right away. Sometimes they were delaying when the switch would happen, and I think that threw off what keys Kenny Pickett was focusing on. This happens. It happened to Tom Brady. It happened to happens to Aaron Rodgers, who's now season. But I mean, that wasn't why he got hurt. But it happens to the greatest of great quarterbacks, and even especially good, mediocre, and bad quarterbacks. And I said this on the Twitter thread where I broke down like 5 different plays where I thought Kenny Pickett just left somebody wide open and didn't convert on third. But what will determine how great of a quarterback he is, how good of a quarterback he is, or how bad of a quarterback he is how he responds to this game moving forward. Not just this Browns game, but all throughout the rest of this season and keeping it forward. I think Mike Tomlin, when we're talking about the quote that I mentioned earlier, where he said he buys in on Kenny Pickett because of his commitment, and that's one of the reasons that his teammates voted him to be captain. Is when you look at the way that he prepares. Good things happen for those guys who prepare that way. It's not like just grinding away for nothing. He is applying things. He is getting there, and the Steelers are confident that he's going to be able to do that. And again, we've seen him make these types of plays in live NFL action against first defenses. So
yeah, no, I mean, this guy, look, the idea that Kenny Pickett, is like the moment's too big for him, or like he can't play well in big moments. This guy went into Baltimore in prime time, playoffs on the line, and won the football game on a game-winning drive, right? I mean, like, we've seen him play his best. And by the way, that was a drive, by the way, that he completed some really nice stuff in structure. Out of structure too, of course, but like that throw to Steven Sims down the middle of the field might be the best throw he's ever had in his entire career, right? It happened in Baltimore in a huge moment. So like, yeah, he can make big throws in big moments. He didn't in this game. The other thing, as long as we're addressing like weird things that get said, I really do not like, I don't know if you've heard this, Chris, like the idea that like, oh, this is good for the Steelers because it's a wake-up call, and they needed a wake-up call because they were buying into their own press. What?
No.
They didn't accomplish it. This team bought into their own press because what? They were undefeated in preseason?
They were beating us to the punch as media whenever we tried to you guys are really confident, like this didn't count. Like we may have been saying it, but in that locker room, whenever we brought that up, they would not be like, we're going to just run everything. We're going to be amazing. There was none of that. And I think that they've gone overboard. I think if anything, and I think this is something that happens a lot with these type of conversations. Fans, they themselves feel like in their head, like, oh, they're confident right now. And then they're like, oh, see, they were too confident. No, they were focused just like they've always been. They just had a bad day, just like the average person has bad days at work. They have bad performances. And it's just that their performance gets put on national television in a stage in front of millions of people for everyone to evaluate and break down the way we are. So I think that's what I got to say this, Tony, because this is also something funny that happens every time the Steelers lose. And Mike Tomlin says the things that need to be said. Like he came out and he said, we got our butts kicked. We need to do this. We need to do that. I need to do this. This is on me as well. Yeah. And you get the people that say, oh, this is just the same old Tomlin stuff. Yeah. What do you want people to say in those instances? You want them to just say, you know what? What some people want to say is, I quit and I leave because I suck at my job. And then that's what people want them to say. But I look at that and I'm like, man, like, I get that you're mad because your favorite team lost in a game that you thought they'd win and you're disappointed in everything. Yeah. But you got to get real with how people approach these situations.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I mean, like, it's a bad loss to the Niners. I mean, like, no one's going to argue like, well, it's a good loss. It was close. No, it was not close. This is a bad loss. But like, it's one game. If they let's say they go out and they beat the Browns on Monday night, all is going to be forgiven for what happened in this football game, right? And of course, fans will do the whole copium thing of like, well, it was just the Niners, so no big deal, right? Because it was a non-division game. They lost it and then they beat the Browns, so it's fine. No, I agree with you. I think all the things that are being said, right? I mean, to go back to the whole like, they bought into their own hype thing. I mean, if this team, for all those fans who are saying that they bought into their own hype or, well, they need a wake-up call. This team needed a wake-up call because if they were undefeated in preseason, I mean, they got bigger problems. They got way bigger problems than what happened. So, no, I'm with you. Look, this is we live. We have this media cycle now where it's like, podcasts every day. These guys do these podcasts every single day, Chris. Can you believe this?
Who does such a thing?
Yeah, I mean, who would do that? But no, but it's like so every game gets amplified so much where like every game is like life or death. The Steelers lost a football game. Now it was a bad loss, but there's 16 more of these things coming, right? Yeah. We will like the broad stroke stuff about this football team. You cannot say anything broad strokes about this team after one game. It was a bad performance, but this game's like what the story of this team season is way out in front of us. It's just getting started.
Absolutely. I want to talk about the defensive line and what they need to do to prepare for this Browns game, especially with the injury to Cam Hayward. We'll do that in a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm Chris Carter. He's Tony Serino. But first, I want to remind you this show is also sponsored by Jace Medical. The Jace case is a product they offer, and it provides five life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a Jace case is fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of our board-certified physicians. You can get ongoing care from our physicians on any treatment-related questions, doctor-created, doctor recommended. Don't be caught unprepared. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. Jace handles everything from online evaluations to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Jace Medical is simple. You go online, fill out a form, and they get you a prescription. Life-saving medications right to your door. The Jace case gives you peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jace Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using my code LOCKEDON. That's LOCKEDON, Locked On at checkout when you go to jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. We're also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the most fun that you can have, winning up to 25 times your money during football season. Just pick 2 or more players and pick more or less than their projected stats, and you can win money on any entry. Prize Picks is the new fun daily fantasy game where all you do is pick 2 to 6 players, and when you pick those 2 to 6 players, you just see, do you have a beat on their day in fantasy? You're going to get more yards, less touchdowns, however you want to pick it. You do that with 2 to 6 players, and you can win up to 25 times your money. This week, look at Justin Jefferson. Will he get more or less than 100 yards? Will Lamar Jackson throw more than one passing touchdowns? You put those two together and you have a Prize Picks chance to win big money. Prize Picks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks selects select players projections with that give you up to 25% off to provide even more value. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, and remember to use the promo code LockedOnNFL, all capital letters, all one word, and you'll get a first deposit match up to $100. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Tony Serino, back on the show. Tony, the Steelers defensive line did not play well against the Niners. If they do not at least improve against the Browns, it could get ugly, because that is what the Browns do very well.
Yeah.
Now, the difference, I'll say this is, I think the Steelers have a little bit more preparation for what the Browns try to do on offense than they do for a Kyle Shanahan offense, which obviously is one of the best systems in the NFL. Do you have confidence that this defensive line can turn things around and find answers even without Cam Hayward, who will now be missing up to 8 weeks? We don't know officially what they're doing with his spot on the roster. You assume he's going to go on injured reserve. Braden Fehoko is a guy I still think they need to be moving up to nose tackle, along with promoting Keanu Benton to get more time over Montrevious Adams. But do you have any confidence that something does get figured out this week to maybe not dominate, but at least mitigate the weaknesses that were up front from this last game?
Do I have confidence? Interesting. I have hope. I have hope. No, I don't have confidence. I don't.
I have hope.
Yeah, I have hope, but I don't have confidence. I mean, Cam Hayward's such a good player, and he's been so important to this matchup. If you go back to the games in which the team has really shut down Nick Chubb, it's some of Cam Hayward's best tape that he puts out there. And that long arm that he has to just, to keep the guard off of him and make a play on the ball. It's what Cam did so well, and it's what they've been kind of searching for, in their, in this kind of next generation of defensive linemen. This team has some high draft picks, right? I mean, ready to go. I believe Loudermilk was a 5th round pick, but it was technically a 4th because they traded a 4th round pick to get him. Leal is a 3rd round pick. Benton's a 2nd round pick. I mean, they've got some youth. They've got some players in there that I like, and there's some youth there. This has had to be a grow up moment, right? I mean, you remember when Tomlin said last year about the offense, like, it's time to grow up, and he said that, I believe, in the Raiders game, because it was a big time moment late in the game. The offense needed to grow up. I mean, this is this is a grow up moment for this young defensive line without Cam Hayward. These young kids have to grow up and hold their own against a Cleveland team that, they've had a ton of success against this team. I'm looking at the numbers from last year in this first matchup. It was 5 yards to carry again for Nick Chubb. So they've had some success in this matchup. It's going to be grow up time if this defense, and specifically this defensive line, is going to have a day shutting down or even slowing down Nick Chubb.
I asked Mike Tomlin what the defensive line has to do better as far as communicating to make sure they're in the right spots against the Browns. Here was his response to that question. Your defensive front communicating faster and establishing the control of line of scrimmage against a team like the Browns that loves to run the ball.
Ball's ready, so are we. We live by that mantra. The offense dictates the pace of play. They do. They have the football. And so our general mentality is we are always communicating as quickly as we can and readying ourselves for actions with that understanding.
One of the knocks last year was Kenny Pickett.
So I think one thing here about Mike Tomlin, they're going to expect these guys to step up, next man up mentality and all that. But I did feel that of the defensive linemen, and we talked about this in our Tuesday show with Alan Saunders from Steelers Now, when we went over my grades, I felt like Keanu Benton was maybe the best defensive lineman the Steelers had, and maybe him getting some more action in this game will be a good thing. He's gonna, he's not gonna dominate. He's gonna win, lose. He's gonna learn here. But if his physicality, which is his biggest thing, can come into play, and they give Braden Fehoko a shot here on top of that, I think it puts the Steelers in a really good chance to at least have a better fight up front against the Browns than the Niners, who I think part of what you'll see, what is gonna happen here is if you win a little bit more, I think Deshaun Watson is prone to making more mistakes than Brock Purdy because he's given a liberty to kind of be, take bigger swings. Brock Purdy is very much, I stick to Kyle Shanahan's system, and that's that. But we saw Deshaun Watson last year when they played him, and week 1 against the Bengals, they may have won that game comfortably, but he did not look comfortable at any point in time.
Yeah, no, I mean, isn't it crazy, like, thinking about, if you would have told yourself 4 years ago, like, the key to beating a team led by Deshaun Watson is to get the ball in his hands, like, how crazy would that have been?
That'd have been crazy.
Yeah, but that's where we are now, right? I mean, like, anyone who watched that Bengals-Browns game saw that, like, Deshaun Watson is still a liability right now. This is not the Deshaun Watson of 4 years ago. And so, yeah, the key in this game is going to be slow down Nick Chubb. You don't even need to stop him, right? You just need to slow him down, get that team into 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10 situations, get the ball in Deshaun Watson's hands. It is the game plan which won them the game in week 18 last year. Kenny didn't have a great start to that game. If I remember that game correctly, that was like not a great offensive game on either side of the ball.
It wasn't
to start. But Watson made big mistake after big mistake, big sacks in that game. I think he got sacked like 8-9 times in that game. Yeah. That's the key, right? If this defense can grow up a little bit, and by the way, you talk about the defensive line. I think the defensive line is a huge key in this game. But you go back to if they're going to run a bunch of outside zone again, it's not just on the defensive line, right? I mean, you need the linebackers to fill, you need the corners to step up and run defense as well. Levi Wallace had that big miss on the Christian McCaffrey. I mean, not to put that entire play on Levi Wallace, the long one, the 60-yarder. But Levi had,
he missed in the hole in a critical way. I mean, there's no other way to put that.
You don't want to put it on one guy, but damn, Levi. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be all 11. This team, they've got to get the Browns into those big money downs, and you got to keep them behind the chains. If the Browns are living in 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1 all day, it's going to be a long day for the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. But if they can get, so we're not talking about keeping Nick Chubb to like 1 yard per carry, right? But like if this thing is closer to 3 or maybe even like 4, right? 3.9 or something, that's where they want to live. If it's 5 yards a carry, the Steelers are donezo.
Yeah, they're in a lot of trouble if it's 5 yards a carry. I go back to last season when they played him. I think he had 77 carries or 77 yards on 12 carries. That was kind of ridiculous, but it was the sacks that kind of saved them in that game. When you go back to it, so he did average more than 5 yards a carry last year, but I think there were other circumstances that played into that. As far as
was that the second matchup?
That was the second matchup.
Really? Interesting.
Right. Yeah, as a total, the Browns rushed for 134 yards on 22 carries. But Chubb had 77 yards on 12, which I know it's over 5. Because 5 times 12 is 60, and actually that's 6.4 yards per carry there. So I mean, they found a way to mitigate it, but again, I think that was based off of the Steelers, whenever the Browns went to pass, they weren't smooth in their system the way the Niners were. And, the Deshaun Watson missed on opportunities. He got sacked. He threw 2 interceptions in that game. And then by the end of the third quarter, the Steelers were up, what was it, 20-7. So then Nick Chubb was out of the gate, that running the ball is not a factor at that point, because
right.
You're trying to do that. So part of this might also be not just the defensive line, but Kenny Pickett and the offense doing their job and actually putting some points up on the board to give the defense some ground to actually defend, because they never had any against the Niners. You're a little muted.
Uh-oh. And I'm back.
You're back.
Yeah. I think, you're right. Play the field position game. It was weird to see Tomlin call it the punter, by the way. That was a weird thing in the press conference.
That's another thing. He did not pull any punches about Presley Harvin. He was like, that cost us in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I think the Steelers have given every grace to Presley Harvin that you can give. You understand what happened in his rookie season, but that dude needs to either punt the ball or find a new job.
Yeah, that was tough. It was a tough look in the press conference. Yeah, you're absolutely right about this whole, you may not need to shut down Nick Chubb at all. Because I'm looking at the box score of this Sunday's game, right? I mean, the Browns put up 24 points, but some of that was late in the game. I mean, if for people who watch the game, the Bengals went for it on 4th down late in the game in their own territory. They got sacked, and then the Browns scored an immediate touchdown after that. So there's 7 of those points are kind of by the way points. They really scored 17 points in this game, and that's a game where the Bengals did not get first downs at all. They didn't keep the ball. Chubb ran for 6 yards per carry in this game, and yet they only put up 17 quote unquote legitimate points. So yeah, I mean, if you could just, again, and I think the key here is to just get Watson in those spots where you want him to throw the ball and make good things happen. Because it is kind of crazy that this is a team that, like you said, in that Week 18 game, Chubb ran the ball pretty well, but Watson put them in bad spots. Same thing this week, right? Chubb ran the ball pretty well, but Watson put them in some bad spots. So I think this, I don't know. Weirdly, Chris, this game may just be less about you really got to shut down Nick Chubb, and more just you got to do enough to get Watson in some bad spots. Yeah,
I agree with that. Another look at that at your point here, the Browns were 4 of 14 on 3rd downs.
Yeah,
you lose often with 4 of 14. It's just that the Bengals were worse because they were 2 of 15. But as a comparison, the Steelers were 5 of 15 against the Niners. The Niners were 6 of 13. And not the 6 of 13 is elite, but it was enough to get the Niners what they wanted. And I think if you keep them at that pace, you win on the money downs, which is something that Mike Tomlin harped on. I think you put yourself in a much better position to win. But again, comes down to a lot of different things. The bottom line is, don't let Nick Chubb be the guy who beats you. Force it to be Deshaun Watson, and let TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, and that secondary be the players who try to make the plays to change this game over.
Indeed. No, and no huge plays from Chubb, right? No 40, 50, 60 yard stuff.
If he gets 4 or 5, you got to live with that, because he's one of the best running backs in football. But do not let him get the 60 yarder that McCaffrey got for the touchdown.
Yep. Exactly. Keep him. That 5 yards to carry needs to be a true 5 yard, 5 yards to carry, not, he broke off a long one to boost his average, because that'll kill the Steelers if they are giving up big plays and giving the Browns easy scoring positions on one play.
Absolutely. Tomorrow we've got crossover Thursday, which means we've got Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns. He'll be joining me on the Locked On Steelers podcast as we do that, our crossover episode. But I gotta give my man Tony some space, because you told us that you're retiring from podcasting, and now I feel like there's so much weight into this. We've had so many great moments on this show.
That's right.
Where Mike Tomlin appeared one time and talked about painting barns all sorts of colors. We've had times where I surprised you with Black Panther music because I was because of Chadwick Boseman showing up to Steelers training camp. Times where we were recording in your car talking about Devlin Hodges and how he was going to lead the Steelers to victory, and then he did that year. Like,
oh my God,
you have had so many great moments on the show. I want to give the floor to you to just say what what's going on, where people can still find you, and just where you're at, man.
Sure. Yeah. So people who don't follow me or may not know this, I announced like I don't know, a month ago on AFC North Talk that I am like retiring from podcasting. But yeah, I'm just going to take the year off. I have this perception of myself that I enjoy football less as an analyst than I would as like an actual fan. So I'm going to take the year off and try to enjoy it. But like I said at the start here, Chris, I couldn't retire without doing one more Locked On Steelers. And so even when I retired even when I said like on AFC North, like, bye everybody, this is the last time you're going to see me, I kind of knew in the back of my mind, like, well, you'll see me one more time because I got to go on with my dog, Chris Carter. Listen, Chris and I have had, I mean, again, the most fun, don't tell the AFC North Talk guys this, but like the most fun I ever had podcasting was here. I mean, this was like that season where we were it was a full season of Duck Hodges, and like the roller coaster ride that season was of going through like it being a joke. It was a hot take joke on the first day of training camp where we're like, I said Duck Hodges is going to make the roster. And you looked at me like, Chris was like, Tony, you're kind of an idiot, but I've never had that respect for you. I mean, that was the look that Chris gave me. Like, dude, like you can't actually be this stupid. And then the roller coaster. I mean, the fact that season just went on, and then it happened, and like he beat the Bengals and Browns in like back-to-back weeks. I mean, like just so much fun. So yeah, I mean, look, I am certainly sad to not be doing this anymore. Certainly be sad to not be on here, Chris. You obviously do a great show, and you've done wonders with this show. So congratulations to all the success that you've had. I'm gonna miss this. Again, I'm going to take a year off. We're obviously Chris and I will still talk privately. You just guys. The problem is Chris and I will probably have conversations like this. You just won't hear them.
Yeah.
But no, I've really enjoyed this. But again, for me, like I want to see what it feels like to watch football as a fan again and not an analyst. So I'm going to give that to myself. So thank you to everyone who followed me over the years, and you can still follow me on Twitter. I'll still be telling jokes on Twitter and whatnot. But yeah. I don't know what to say. Thanks to everybody. Thank you, Chris.
This is what Tony, I just want to say you are loved. You are appreciated here by a lot of our guests. A lot of people have been asking me, where's Tony Serino? Get him back. Y'all know why we he's been busy. Yeah. But Tony, I just got to say I'm blessed to have met you. Back when I think it was the 2018 training camp on the Friday Night Lights practice, I was walking around and I was like, who's this guy? He looks lost. I want to talk to him and see who he is. And then you brought me on your podcast as a guest for like once a month. Yeah. And eventually you brought me on here. And this was such a great opportunity that's done so much for me in my professional career. I cannot thank you enough for the doors that you opened for me and bringing me on here as your partner and then giving me the show as you went off and did your other professional career. Yeah. It's just it's a blessing and an honor to have worked with you. And I do hope that your sabbatical from podcasting is not that long, sir, because you are an entertaining dude. And a lot of people will miss hearing your voices on the airwaves.
I appreciate that. But no, I mean, I think, I couldn't have thought of anyone better to have as a co-host and to continue doing the show. As I've told you many times privately, and I'll say it here on the show, when I first met Chris and the kind of rapport that he and I instantly had, I told you early on, Chris, I said, it's not a matter of if you're going to be successful in this thing. It's just a matter of when. You did. Right. Because the drive, the knowledge that you have and the passion that you have for this, it comes through every day on this show. And so all the success you've had, not on this show, but not, you're with the Post-Gazette now. I mean, you got the big time gig. It is so well deserved for you and everything that you put into this. So congratulations to you and congratulations to all the success you've had. And again, like I said, I'm going to miss doing this, but we're just going to have these conversations over text message and phone calls now and not podcast. So
We got to stop doing this before I start crying.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Locked On Steelers podcast. Hope that you enjoyed this little diatribe between us at the end of the show here. You can find Tony at Steeler Country on Twitter, where he'll still be giving his funny takes during the games and around. You can find me, Chris Carter, on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. You can read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com for all my coverage there. You can also check me out here in the Locked On Steelers podcast Monday through Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes. Thanks again, everybody. Crossover Thursdays tomorrow. Come back and check us out then as we break down Steelers versus Browns.